Hello, and welcome to Michell Consulting's webinar series for our Michell University. Today we're going to be working with SAP Business One, and we're going to be talking about an add-on that comes with SAP Business One called Copy Express. This webinar is being recorded. It will be available on our website, so you can visit us at www.michellgroup.com to view this, plus all our other webinars in our university series. So let's talk a little bit about the Copy Express and what the Copy Express does. Copy Express is an add-on within SAP that allows us to move data from one database to another. Now this is useful for several reasons. A lot of times what happens is we will have a client that will want to create a second company, and the company operates basically the same as the first company, meaning that they have the same vendors, they have the same terms, the same manufacturers, the same shipping types, and so on. So they want to create a company and bring all that information over and not have to key everything by hand. We could easily just copy one company and restore it, but then we get all the historical data. So we want to do it without the historical data. So the Copy Express allows us to basically move from database to database. It's designed to move many of the sub-files. It can move large data, but we do not recommend using it for large data. In this case, if you want to move all your items and your business partners, we recommend using the DTW, the Data Transfer Workbench, which we have in our webinar series. This is also useful for a lot of times what happens is we want to, let's say we do a form or a certain check and we do it in the test database. So we align our checks in, say, the test database or in the OEC computers database, and we align forms, we run some tests, and now we're ready to bring this into live. Copy Express is good for this, bringing forms over and documents over from one database to another. So let's begin. For purpose of today's demo, we're working with SAP Business One version 8.82. So what we need to do is we need to turn the add-on for Copy Express on. So if we go to Administration and we go to Add-ons, you can see here in the Add-on Manager that we have Copy Express and we actually have it connected. For those who are not familiar with this, what we can do is if you do not see the add-on in here, we would go into the Add-on Administrator. Okay. And in the Add-on Administrator, you can see all the add-ons that are available or that come with SAP Business One. For example, here's Outlook integration. So these are the available add-ons. So what we would do is we would simply highlight that add-on and we would move it over to this field. We have default groups. And again, Copy Express I have as manual, which means I need to turn it on and off. I can set it to be automatic. This means it will automatically go on. I can set it to mandatory. Mandatory means the SAP will not run unless the add-on is running as well. And you can disable the add-on. So you can see here we have these on, and we can see the screen printer is disabled. So we can do that, and again, we would set it as active. We can turn on a force install. This is recommended sometimes in the beginning, like when we're doing an SDK to make sure that it loads correctly, but this is not really necessary. You can also set user preferences. So if you look here under the user preferences, you can see, for example, Sophie here is manual, and it's also default. What this means is that this here is the company level. So let's just say, for example, fixed assets. Fixed asset, we can set this to the automatic, okay, but then we only want fixed assets for people in the accounting department. So let's say Sophie is in the sales department. So there's no reason for Sophie even to work with the fixed assets. What we can do is we can go to the user preferences, and under Sophie for fixed assets, we can disable the fixed assets for her, and so on. In this case, Copy Express is using the preference default. Default means that for this user, Sophie, we're using the company preferences, and so on. So you can set these up. And we do have some more detail on these on the add-on administrator. I just want to give you a brief overview for that. And again, something like Copy Express is to be used at a management level. So again, I just have it on manual, which means when I do that and I start my SAP Business One, the add-ons will not automatically start. They will be in this discontinued. So you can see here, like for example, fixed asset. All these are set for manual, so they're not turned on. So what I would do is I would just highlight, okay, and I would start the add-on. okay, versus I already have it turned on, so we're going to do it. I can also stop it here. Once the add-on is turned on, for example, Copy Express is now on, you will see, if we go to Tools, we can see now we have this open Copy Express. If the add-on is not running, it's not on, it's disabled, you will not get this. So this allows us to go in and look at the information. So let's open up Copy Express. And again, we could do a couple things. We can create a new worksheet. We can open an existing worksheet, and we also do have a log file. So in this case, we're going to open up a new worksheet. And again, this is going to be the base company and the target. This is important because the base is where it's coming from, and the target's where it's going. So I'm going to pull information from the base company or database. I'm going to click here. Again, I need to log in to the server. So what I'm doing is I'm opening a connection to the server, and I have two companies. So we're going to say OEC Computers is my base company. Just going to log into that. And then we're going to use the demo group for our target. So we would, in this case, we would have created a database, and then we would go here. So now what we do is we've got basically our base and target companies. Here we have some options. So let's talk a little bit about the options. The copy modes. You can do a replace all. What this will do is it will take all the information from the base and copy it, replace everything in the target. That's something that's used on some fields, but it's not really recommended. We have update existing records. What this will do, this will actually update the records you have with the new information. We can also add new records without updating existing records. And then we can also add new records and update. So we have an option. So for example, let's say we're talking about shipping types. And in the base, we had UPS and FedEx. And we didn't, and then on the target company, we had, let's say, U.S. Post Office. If I do replace all, I'm going to lose the U.S. Post Office as a shipping type and the target because I'm going to replace that with the two shipping types from my base. So what's going to happen is I'm just going to bring over FedEx and UPS and replace what's there. So I would lose the FedEx. If I update existing records, nothing's going to come over because since I don't have FedEx and UPS set up, I won't bring that over. If I add new records without updating existing, what I would do is then I would add the UPS and the FedEx, but I'm not going to update the U.S. mail, and so on. You get the understanding. So typically it's normally done in one of these two records here, depending on how you want to do it. Here we have response. We have some options. So what do we do if copy? Continue if it fails, obtain user confirmation, or terminate the process. Because we can, say we're moving over shipping types, and there's 100 shipping types. And along the way, we have an issue with something. So something didn't bring in, so these are our options. We can continue copying the other ones. We can stop and prompt the user what we want to do, or we can just stop the process. There's also a forced backup. It's very important to back up your databases when you do this. If you have the forced database, every time you run this program, it'll prompt you to actually create a backup. Typically what I do in situations when I'm creating a new company, I will go into SQL and do my own backup here through SQL. And then what I would do is go in and just leave that turned off and I would back up as I see the need to. You can leave it on, and again, you can do it that way. So actually, let's just turn this off. I didn't put let's cancel. We don't need to open up SQL, but we understand how we can do a backup in SQL. And again, this is my configuration. Again, these are just templates I have or files I have set up for everything in the system. So here, what we're going to do is we're going to turn off the forced backup. We also have ignore missing user-defined fields in the target company structure. What that is, and we do have a webinar on user-defined fields. Those are fields that I created in my target company but have not been created in the base company. We can also move those over within Copy Express. This can be changed as we go through. This is the default, so we're just going to set this default. But every time we go to run the program, we can change this information. So let's just click OK, and let's just click OK. Those were the options, so let's click OK. So now we're opened up, and we can see here that we have our base document, which is the OEC computers, and we have our target document, which is the demo group. Again, we can expand all this information, and we can see these are the things that we want to bring over. Now, when working with Copy Express, there are dependencies. And if you're doing it for the first time on a new database, it's almost like setting up that database to begin with. We know that working with SAP, when we create a new database, there are certain things we have to do. For example, when we're dealing with house banks, we need general ledger accounts. So we need to create our accounts before we can add them to our banks. We have the same thing in certain payment methods. When we create terms, we need to tie those to price lists, so we need to have price lists. So we can't just do this, for example, and just turn everything on and bring things over, because it creates issues here in the dependencies. And again, it has issues with large data. So typically what we do is we do it in sections. Let's just turn this off and see, you see these little information here. This is coming from the view dependencies, because these are all dependent on each other. So for example, what I recommend to do, and what we do here, is when we do this, we will do it typically as we would set somebody up. So usually what I will do is I will do, let's say, the users. So you can see I can click that, and I can bring the users over. All right, and what that'll do, that'll bring the users from one company to another, and you can see they're not dependent on anything else. So I would, again, just kind of go through the way I would set up SAP Business One. I will do that. When I go here to execute, again, you're seeing this information here. I could change that. You can see this comes up again, but we just set this in the beginning of how we want to do it. But we can do it each time. We click OK. Again, it's going to prompt you about that because we do recommend backups, but since I've already done my manual backup, I don't want to stop each time and do a backup. So you can see here now that down below you can see it's reading and writing the information. So what we're doing is we're going into the base and we're reading that information, and then we're going into the target and we're writing the information. So what we did is we brought the users over. Let's open the log file, and you can see here what would come over. Okay, we didn't have anything to bring over because this is demo information, but here you would see all the information that would have come over. Now, then what I would normally do is now see when I turn on, for example, the authorizations, this right here, this additional authorization creator is dependent on another field. So you can see that it's dependent on the user-defined fields, which is here. Okay? And by clicking on that, I can open up all my different user-defined fields. So that's important, too, to have those turned on and turned off. Let's just close this. So we can turn this off. So what I'm doing here is, you notice I'm actually going in and I'm bringing the information over. You can see here in my file, what I can do is I can open existing worksheets. So what I can do is, let's say as I'm going along at a certain point, let's say I've done a couple of these, I can go to File, and I can save the worksheet as. I can give it a name. I can save the configuration file as, and then I can copy that configuration file over. So I can do that, and then when I want to come back in, I can just, in the beginning, I can open up a new worksheet. I can also, as you see, I can bring certain things over. So let's say, for example, let's talk about the forms. Okay, so let's say we did a print layout design in the OEC computers, and now we want to use that in the new company. So we created a form in the base company, and we want to bring it into the target company. So we're going to go into customization. We're going to go into print layouts, and here we have our documents and reports. If we click here, we're going to get all of them. But if we double-click, we get this. So you can see that these are two things that were created. Okay, you can see I have this check stub MCG, and I have this one here. So what I can do is I can do that. So now by selecting just this one, so this is my accounts payable check that I aligned in the OEC Computer Demo Company, and now I want to bring it into the other company. So the same thing, I go here, and again, you're seeing the methods. Okay, we'll click OK. And again, it always tells you about the backup. We're just going to go ahead and without the backup, we're going to look at our log file, and we're going to open up the log. I close the log, but we can open up the log and take a look at it. We can also just run that again. Again, this most likely is already in the other copy because these are copies of databases. So there we go. So you can see that nothing's happening. The reason why nothing's happening is that this demo corporation is just a backup of my OEC computers, so the data is the same. But if I was to create something new, I can actually bring that over. So again, if we look at this information here, so again, under customization, we have any queries and any information that we have here related to the base company. We have our users and our user authorization. We have our display settings, so we can look here at the company display settings and so on. And if you look at this, this again kind of follows within SAP. Under normal circumstances, when I would create a new company, what I would do is I would go to administration, system initialization, for example, the company settings, I would go here. Okay, define my company settings. I would follow this. I would go to my general settings and define this. But see, for example, here now under general settings, these are payment terms. So I have to select the payment term. That's the dependency. Now, I can't bring over, for example, let's say this one has the default term is net 30. Well, I can't bring this over by itself. That's a dependent because this setting is in the new company. I won't have this. And then if I look at the terms, I have to bring the terms. So you can see that terms are dependent on price list. So we have to go to that little scenario of that's what it's doing. So if I was to bring over these general settings, by default, it's going to want this other information. So if I go to, say, under display settings and I click this, you can see the user. What happens is I need the users and I need the user-defined fields and so on. Now, user-defined fields is dependent on the user-defined tables and so on. So if we go in here, we can see that. So again, initial settings here for, say, again, if you want to do this, the chart of account setting is dependent on the currencies because currencies are in the chart of accounts. So you would get those little arrows. And you can see that by here, by just viewing or not viewing the dependencies. I view the dependencies. If I try to run it without that and I see that little view, it's going to prompt me. Some categories may depend on others, or unselected categories may result in failure to copy. So again, that comes up anyway, so I would just turn it off. So what I normally do is I just leave that on. I can turn that on. And again, that's how we work with Copy Express. So what Copy Express will do is a matter of going through here. And again, what I recommend, and what we recommend if you're doing a full company, if you just created a new database and you're bringing things over, you need to bring it over in the way you actually create the company. So you would go first into, I always like to do the users first and the user authorizations, then maybe if I want to do the user-defined stuff here, I can do it. But the majority of the time, Copy Express is used to bring over pieces or parts. Again, user-defined tables, user-defined fields. Typically what we do is we have a demo database or we have a test database of the live. So what we want to do is we want to define those user-defined fields and tables in our test database. We want to have our clients check it, make sure the process flow works correctly so we don't have any issues with the live data. And then when we're ready, we want to move those over. So we can do the same thing. We can just click on the user-defined tables, and we can double-click. Just if we double-click, we uncheck. So here, for example, let's say we created this new table here, these two. So we're just going to go like that. So all we're doing is we're bringing over the details. These two tables are coming over, okay, versus all the tables. So we can also do that too. We can do it for specific accounts, and we can also do master data information. So here we have under the initial settings, we can see under the general settings, again, we have maybe posting periods and document numbers under this setup. Again, if we had any alerts, address formats we have changed. We have here under the finance setup, again, as we discussed, obviously if I want to bring over house banks, you can see I get this little dependent flag. It's going to turn on and off the highlight. So you can see obviously that house banks are dependent on banks, because I can't have a house bank without a bank. And once I do that, banks are dependent on countries. So I have to do my countries and so on. And once I do that, I'm pretty much good. So we can turn that off. And then we have under logistics, again, we have all our setup. So if we want to do inventory settings and price lists, we also have here, again, what we want to do. Maybe we just want to bring over partners, or we want to just bring over shipping types and so on. But again, if we click on the manufacturers and we double click, we can see how we have these manufacturers here. We can double click and say we only want to, let's say, bring over these two, and so on. We have our chart of accounts. And again, the chart of accounts and default determination, budget, and so on. And we have some master data information. So here, if we want to go double click on the business partners, you're going to see a list of all my customers and vendors. But again, I don't want to bring them all over. Let's say the request was to create a new company using the settings of the original company, but they just want the vendors because they're going to have a whole new set of customers. So here what I can do is I can just look here at the BP type and say, just bring over the vendor. And notice the minute I hit this vendor, you're going to see all these dependents because the vendor is dependent on all this. Obviously, a vendor, I have to look at general settings for the defaults. We have to look at the document printing. Again, we have to look at the chart of accounts and the tax, the payment terms for the vendor. So you're going to see here all that's dependent on a vendor. Commission group, salespeople, obviously all this stuff is available here. If you see the little exclamation in red in parentheses, this is because it's not, if I hit the drop down or I open up, it tells you all the ones that are involved. So again, I would start from the very simple setup and eventually work my way down. And you can see that's kind of how this is set up. So let's close this. So again, let's turn that off. You can see we're kind of, as we go down here, we're getting other information. And we can do manual transactions if we want. So if we look here, we can do journal entries if we want, and so on. So that's the Copy Express. To recap, what Copy Express allows us to do, it allows us to actually take data from the data tables from one company to another company. This is typically used by a lot of our clients for several things. It's typically used for, we create something in a test environment. So we have a backup of the live company in test. Maybe we created some user-defined fields in tables. We want to bring those over. Maybe forms. In this case, what I've done is I went into the demo company or the test company, and I created a check alignment for an accounts payable check or a new form. We've tested it. It looks like it's going to be okay. We don't want to have to go in and realign the form in the new database or in the live database. We're just going to copy the form over. You can see that. We can also use it from, if you want to start a whole new company. So for example, we have a client that's creating a second company. It wants everything from the first company, let's say, except customers. Again, we can just bring all the information over this way. We have some options here. Again, we can save the worksheet and reopen it as we're working on it. We can view our dependencies, which is very important to see what's dependent. And again, what we can do is if we open up, for example, here, we double-click on the word queries, we're going to see all the queries. So if we were to hit this, we would get all the queries. All right, so again, let's say we created a couple complex queries in this database, and we know that they're working in the test. We've had the client go through. So we don't want to create any problems in live, so we can say, okay, well, we want this one, and that one. And those will come over. And again, that's what really the heart of Copy Express is for. It can do large amounts of data. It just not recommended to do that. It doesn't work well with large amounts of data. In that case, if you have a customer with, thousands of items and hundreds of customers, we recommend using the DTW, the Data Transfer Workbench, which we have a webinar on our website for that. So let's just go here, File, and let's exit. And again, it's going to ask us, do I want to save the worksheet? We're just going to say no. So now we're back. And again, we can see here, we open Copy Express under Tools. If we want to go back, we can reopen the Copy Express. So let's recap what we've done. You can see here that we have an add-on, which is part of SAP Business One. So if we go to Administration and we go to Add-ons, the Add-on Manager, we have an add-on called Copy Express. If I disconnect this add-on, I'm going to stop it just to show you. Okay, so now it's disconnected. Now when I go to Tools, you see I don't see the Open Copy Express here, so I would have to turn it on. Typically, Copy Express is set that way, manual. If you go into the add-ons for the first time and you do not see it here, it's not installed, or it's not pending, you would then go here to the add-on administrator. It would be most likely on this list. You will highlight it, drag it over, like that. Just drag that back. And then you can set the default group. You have options, manual. Since I have this set on manual, every time I want to run this, I have to start it. I can set it to automatically start every time I open up SAP Business One. I can make it mandatory, which means the add-on has to be running. I can't turn it off once it's running. It has to be mandatory. And I can just go ahead and disable it. I have to obviously make it active here. And then this is the default. So this is a company default. So for example, as we said, for fixed asset, we may have fixed asset to be automatic for company, but then we want to go into the users here that are really going to work with the add-on. So the users that are really going to work with, say, fixed assets or Copy Express, we want to go to those people and give them access. So for example here, Sophie is using the default preference from here, but then everything else is turned off. And again, once we turn it on, so you can see here, if we go Tools, we do not see it on the menu. You just see the last one is Print. So if we go here and we just highlight it and we start it, you can see now it's running, it's connected. You can see the menu kind of changed. So now if we go Tools, now we see Open Copy Express. We can open it. Again, here we can load that existing worksheet. What we're doing is when we do click OK, we're actually now determining our base and target document. So the base is where the data is coming from, and the target is where it's going. So we can click here. Again, I have to open up a connection. So I'm going on as the administrator, and I'm opening up a connection to the server. Okay. So again, choose my base. I'm going to choose OEC Computers. I'm going to log in with my manager password. What it's going to do is going to open up, so it's opening up a connection to the database, and then my target, I'm just going to take this one here. I don't have to rekey the code because I've already logged in as manager. So I'm taking data from OEC Computers, and I'm copying it into this demo group. I have my options. These are my default options that I can set. Remember, every time we run it, we can change these. We have our methods, replace all, update. You can update and so on. I typically run this one here, add new and update existing, just in case there's stuff there. You have, again, what do you want to do if it fails? You want to just continue the copy process. You want to obtain user confirmation or terminate the process. So in the case, let's say I'm bringing over manufacturers, and I have about 100 manufacturers, and for some reason there's a problem halfway through. With number 50, if I want to continue to copy, I will just ignore that one and bring over the rest. I can stop, prompt the user, what do you want to do? You want to continue or not? Or I can just stop the process. Force backup, be very careful when you do this. I mean, if you're doing it for the first time, I would leave the force backup on because you want to make a backup. It'll always, if you don't force the backup, okay, it'll let you do it. It'll warn you. But you should make backups as you're doing this, because as I'm moving data from one company to another, I could create a problem. I could make a mistake. So typically what I do is I leave the force backup turned off. I've used this so much, and what I do is before I start, I go into SQL here, and I do my backup. And I constantly, from time to time, if I'm going to, do some major movements of, say, items and stuff, I'll just make backups. I just like to do it in SQL. So I don't have to I don't have to do a backup each time I run, because I may run several things knowing they're going to be okay. Again, these are the paths for the files. This is the log and worksheet files where everything is stored. And again, this is the default. Every time you run it, you can make a change for that. So you can see here, we have our base and target documents, and this is what we want to bring over. Again, you can see these little exclamations. These are dependencies, as we discussed before. Certain data is dependent on other data. So for example, if you just think about when you work with SAP, when you want to create something, for example, in order for me to create a house bank, I have to define the bank first. So if I go to select house bank, it's going to prompt me as a dependent to bring the bank. Also, house banks are tied to general ledger accounts. So if I'm going to create a house bank, I'm going to need a GL account, and so on. So I have those dependencies throughout the system. Typically, if you're doing an entire company, you're going to do it in that order, like you would create a company. What I would do, for example, I would say bring over the users first, then some display settings, and the initial settings and setup, and then maybe my chart of accounts. I just work my way like I would create a company. You can also, typically it's used a lot if you just want to bring something over. So in the example we gave, let's go to the print layouts here. And let's say that we created a form. So we can double click, and let's say the check stub MCG. That's a check alignment that we did in OEC computers, and it works fine. Now we want to bring it into the live company, so we're just going to select that one. We're just bringing that one. There's no other dependencies on that, so we're okay. We don't see any little red exclamation points. And here we click. And again, this is just telling me that copies, they should be done with the add new records without updating existing. So it's going to prompt that. So it's just going to change it for me here. We're going to click OK. Again, there's our warning about the backup. So I already backed up internally. I won't have to back up just for something as simple as this. And again, the log file would show me what I did. It doesn't show anything because this already exists in the other company. So there's no changes to it. So that's it. So when I'm done, I would just say File, and we can exit here. I don't want to save the current worksheet. And then when I'm done, I can leave it on. If I want to turn it off, I can just go Administration, Add-ons, the Add-on Manager, and let's just click it and stop it. So I'm done. So again, it's a nice, CopyExpress is nice for things like that. It's a very useful tool for copying a lot of the setup data. I don't really recommend it for doing large amounts of data like business partners and items. It can be done. It's just a little bit of a slower process. For that kind of stuff, I use the DTW, the Data Transfer Workbench, which is really designed for big amounts of data. So what I would do is, in this case, if I want to bring the customers and stuff, I would just create a query. In the base company, I would just export the data into Excel, use the DTW, import it back in. But again, it can be used. But again, it's a very nice functionality in the system. And the main thing that we use it for, a lot of our clients for, is that kind of stuff. Is that we have a copy of the live database in training, and we're doing something new. We're creating a new form. We're creating some new stored procedure and queries, and we do it in that test company. We run it. Maybe we create a new form, and we highlight the new form, and We get it to work just where the client wants it, and they test it, and they say, okay, that's great, it's good to go. Let's implement that. Let's bring it into the live database. Copy Express is perfect for that. I just go to Copy Express, I move the formatted searches or the user-defined fields or the print layouts, and it's an easy just bringing them in. It's like, for example, with Crystal, it kind of works the same way. Crystal, if you did a Crystal report in the test database, you can export Crystal out and you can import Crystal back in. So it's that same principle. What I'm doing is I'm exporting data out and I'm importing data in. So again, very nice functionality, very easy to work with. Okay, so that concludes today's webinar on our SAP Business One Copy Express. As I mentioned, this is being recorded. It's going to be available on our website, so you can visit us at www.michellgroup.com to view this plus our other training videos. And we thank you for your time.